Hi YouTube, Marko with Marko Custom Build Models, coming today with the old question: what happens if you take wheel wells from a Nomad kit and graft them into a Sedan kit? Well, this is something that probably wouldn't happen very often as a modeler because once you cut the Nomad kit, you don't really have a kit to build, and that's a really nice kit, so you don't really want to screw up that kit to do a two-door post Bel Air with open wheel wells like you would have seen in American Graffiti. But sometimes I come across kits that are built up that are pretty nice. This one, for instance, is just a 57 Chevy, but it's an older AMT release. It's a good enough kit to restore. I probably wouldn't cut into this one, but if you had to, you wouldn't be wrecking a new kit. Although sometimes these kits are better than some of the new ones, but that's a whole other story. Sometimes I get kits, I pay $1 or $2 and I get kits that are like this. They're built up, they're terribly done, too much glue, too much paint. It's not really a kit you could restore, but I use them for parts. A car like this, if you wanted a wheel well, you could hack it out of this body and you wouldn't feel bad. So I happen to pick up a Nomad kit like that. I don't have the kit anymore because I actually gave the roof to somebody else. And in the process of cutting the roof out, I was thinking I could use the wheel wells. And they got kind of broken in the process, so I'll have to put it back together. But here's one wheel well that can be glued back together. And I'll just show you the process of doing this. Can be a little different because I'm actually going to show you the process. So here it is with the wheel well in the body, grafted in from the Nomad. As you can see, no body work has been done here. This is just with the plastic. There's a little bit of work on the rocker that I want to glue in here, another piece, and sand it out to match. I just threw some primer on there to show you. This side isn't done, so I'm going to start that process and do it with you guys so you can see what I do to modify a car like this, or add or put a different wheel well in, or repair. If you go back and watch one of my other videos, I did this Mustang GT350 Shelby that I'm working on, and there's still a lot of details and things that need to be done. But on the body, this was an altered wheelbase car, and the wheel well was forward and much bigger drag racing car. And I had taken stock quarter panels from a 66 Mustang convertible kit and grafted them into this body. So again, this is just with a paint that I use sort of to see how it looks. Obviously I have a lot of still some sanding to do. I still have the body line in there, but this is with no filler. That's just plastic and sanded in with the plastic magic glue that I use. And I also widen the hood scoop, and as you can see, you can still see that there, so that needs some work. Anyway, but we're not talking about this car today. If you want to see a video on it, I have 2 videos on this, and you can go back and look at that. The Nomad has several releases, and so does the Sedan. And basically inside that kit, you'll basically see the same thing. So I just want to point that out. Also, I'll take out the bodies and show you. Okay, here's an example of a Nomad kit that is, this was bought as a built-up as well. Somebody had painted it green, they had glued in a couple parts. I believe this kit is restorable, so I don't really want to cut this up. I could probably fix that, but as you can see, there's quite a bit of glue on where the rear door and window would be, and some on the inside here. But anyway, it's not a big deal. This kit could be restored. I think that could be stripped down and redone. Also, this is a Sedan kit that is also a survivor. This has been stripped, so all the paint has been taken off. Now this is ready to be restored or built back if a guy wants to do so. I always love 55, 6, 7 Chevys. What I do find wrong with this kit is I find that the C-pillar here is a little thin on one side, so I'll add a little bit of styrene in there. Also, the roof line kind of leads into a hardtop roof line in the front here, but anyway, this is the only way you can get a 55 two-door post kit without cutting up another couple of kits to make this happen. So it's a nice kit. AMT did a pretty good job on this. These 2 kits are almost identical. There are some changes. The nature of the kits, the way the chassis is, the detail, all the parts that glue in are very similar. And if you'll notice on a 55 Nomad, the gas door is in a different placement than the Sedan, and that's true on the real car. So when you're cutting this out and trying to line it up in this quarter panel, for instance, don't try to line up the gas doors. I would try to avoid the gas door on the Sedan, and the fuel filler door will maybe intrude in here, but you can fill that in, and leave the Sedan door where it is, and try not to line up the gas doors on these quarter panels with a Nomad. I use Plastic Magic. Now what I do with the Plastic Magic, I put it in my own little bottle. This is the product here that I use, though. If you haven't seen, I have shown this on other videos. What I love about this liquid glue is it basically welds the plastic together. In discovery of this glue here, I've been able to build things like that concrete truck over there, where I've lengthened it and things like that. With other glues, a job like that would just not happen as easy. So anyway, I recommend this if anybody wants to do this kind of modeling. Also, if you're just putting models together, it's a very nice glue to work with. And I just pour it into a smaller container so that, one, it doesn't get tipped over as easy. If it does get tipped over or gets contaminated, as you can see, it gets a little milky from using it. This way I can keep it clean. If I want clean glue, I can clean this out and have something clean. So if you get a lot of color in it, it will go on. If you're working with white plastic and you're gluing a lot of red plastic, that'll turn kind of pinkish red. When you go to a white plastic, it will show up on the white. So that's why I would recommend doing it that way. Let's glue this together. So I'm just going to put this was broken. So I'm going to glue that back together. This glue I just add a little more, and it'll make like if you squeeze it together, really welds that together there. I'm going to just let that sit and dry for a moment. Okay, let's put that away. This is sort of a mechanical style drafter's pencil. And this mechanical style drafter's pencil allows you to you sort of put this thicker lead in here. You get a sharpener on the end, and you can really sharpen that nice. And that'll allow you to set it up in the pencil like so. I then take the quarter panel and I line it up with the model where I want it. And as you can see, the bottom of this fender is not necessarily the same as the bottom of the fender on the Nomad as to the Sedan. But anyway, by doing so, I'm just going to draw a line on here. Okay. A line across the top here. So as you can see, there's my cutout. Obviously this is a little bit crooked here, but that's the lines I'm going to follow to get this wheel well in. And one of the things I'll do is I'll cut it a little smaller, because you can always file it or sand it and make it fit. You want a nice tight fit when you're working with this glue. Big surface area is important to be able to get a good bond. Get my little surgical saw here, and I'll make 2 vertical cuts and cut that straight up. You want to try and keep your cuts nice and square. Okay. Then what I'm going to do, line that up and see where we're at. Looks good. Okay, and then I'm going to take a knife and I'm going to scribe a straight edge here from this connection to there. Okay, so I'm just going to show you. I just take the knife, I'll just score it here. When you score styrene, what's nice, if you just give that a little bit of a twist here, it will actually just break straight across, and you've now cut out that stock quarter panel. It's now removed from the car. And this quarter panel could be grafted in anywhere else on another model, so I never throw stuff like this out. Then we check the fitment of the panel. Nice and tight. This is actually very tight, which is good. So I need it to be just a little bit higher up on this side here. A little bit higher up, that's okay. We want to cut the hole smaller so we can always bring it up. We just want to carve out a little bit at a time. Now you may want to use a file for this, or I like using those nail files with the coarse grit on it. You buy them dollar store or makeup place. They work good. Or you can straight edge it like I'm doing here. Just get rid of some of the flash that I've created. And now let's just try this again. Also, on your wheel well too, you can always take the part you're putting in. I got a flat board like this, and just sand the part a little bit. That's also another trick. And you can take the corners. I just give a little bit of a sand on the corners because I can always fill in those little gaps, but this way I'm not fighting when I'm placing the panel in here. If the corner's not completely trimmed out, I can actually get that panel to fit in there. So I have to come up just a little more. So what I did on this side is the rocker panel edge is a little thinner on the Nomad kit. Not that it is different on the real car, but on the kit it is. I made that line up with the bottom of the edge on the rocker panel. I cut the wheel well square, and where the back ends, I'll show you what I do with that. So let's just take out a little more here. You say sometimes filing this is a little bit safer, but you do this however you want to do it. You can also straight blade it, kind of take a little bit out. Just a little bit at a time. You don't want to overdo it. If you do happen to overdo it, you can use some thin styrene or plastic and fill that in. So you can see I'm very close to fitting now. You notice it's a very tight fit. That's what I want, because when I put the glue in there, it's going to soften the edge, and when I push it in there, it's going to actually create a better bond. Just took out a little more. Now we can see exactly that. I'm exactly where I want to be on there. Tension on that panel. You can see it's bowed out. If I give that a push, it'll be some tension on there, and that's good. That's exactly what I want. I want to see how that looks. Perfect. Okay. So now I'm just going to give a little bit of a trim here, both sides. And this also gives you a chance, if you want a little bit more to the front, a little bit more to the back, you put your wheel well in place and then test it against the chassis. You want to make sure you're at the center line, or that it lines up with the other side. The glue in the brush, and you have to gingerly put this on. Don't be scared. Place it in there. Okay, the bottom edge is lined up. Okay, now I'll take some glue. Again, you got to be willing to use a bit of this to get a good bond. Okay, so now the trick is here when you're lining up this quarter panel is you want to line up the outside, not the inside. So if the inside, if the thickness of the panel isn't right, that's okay. You want to not feel anything on the outside of that panel. Put that in there. If you want anything, you may want the panel to be just a little bit out so that when you sand it out, it'll actually feather in very nicely. We want to follow this curve of the outside of the panel. And at the very bottom, I'm not so worried about this little part here because I'm going to glue something in there. But for right now, I'm just going to make sure that as far down as I can go, this panel does not have a lip that catches like I do now. Just want to make sure that it's nice and flowing. Okay, so that you don't have, the more time you take here in the fitment, the less time you'll take sanding this out and making it look good. There it is. Okay. I'm just going to get a little more. Now, what I got here, I notice I got a little bit of a sliver here that tapers down at the end. And I don't like that because it's going to be a little bit of a gap. So let's take some styrene. I'll show you how I fix that. I cut myself off a little sliver like this. It's very thin, not much to it. I'll load this gap up with this liquid glue. Then I'm going to slide this sliver in vertically from the bottom, making a wedge shape. There we go, which will fill in that gap, so I don't have to do that with super glue or any sort of filler. You just want to get it in there. Let the glue melt it a bit, and that will become one. So you can see it's just sticking out. That's okay. Give that a little bit of a brush. So as you can see, this car has been primered red. I added the red oxide primer on the other side to touch up the wheel well, but when I got the body, it was sprayed in this red oxide primer. I don't normally recommend red oxide to paint. It's a very hard paint to cover up. Hard primer, I should say. No matter what color you put over top of this primer, it never shows up the way you want it to because of the red below it. So when you're modeling, red oxide primer is not really what you want to use. But 55 Chevys came factory with a red oxide primer on it, so this gets a pass. So I do with this glue, I just sit here and I will adjust and make sure this dries in the body without popping out or having any high spots or low spots. Because the more time you spend on this now, the easier it is. This stuff that's hanging out, I don't want to be catching it with my finger, so I'm just going to take my snips, and because of the bottom edge of the quarter panel on the Nomad comes down further than the Sedan, I'm just going to trim off this entire little bit here. But I'm not going to trim it flush. I'm going to leave it high so that I can sand it out nice to this bottom edge after. So I'm just going to take a little more of the glue and just give it a nice bath in this glue. And what that'll do is just give it a lot of flow. It'll soften that plastic and then just weld it right in there. I do the front, and then I go ahead on the back side, do the same thing. If you try to do this with a little bit of glue, it'll never happen. You have to get that panel, you have to get that plastic wet. You have to get it so that joint is just soaked so it becomes soft and bonds. And then after that, you can let this sit overnight. You can come back to it the next day and you can sand this thing. Or you could come back 2 hours later and start working on it. But once you soften this panel up with this much glue, you'll want to let it sit for a little bit, because if you start working this panel now, it's going to move around on you. So what I'm doing is I'm just making sure that it dries in place, and then we'll go on to the next step. So I'm gonna let this dry for a bit, and then I'll come back and I'll show you the rest of this process. But that's just roughed in. That wheel well's just roughed in. There you go. Nomad wheel well in a 55 Chevy. It's been about 5-10 minutes of me just just pressing on this part of the quarter panel and just making sure that it's lined up with the outside edge of this panel. As you can see, I can drag this tool along and I get sort of both ways. I get a little bit of a catch, and that's good because what that's done is when I've pushed this plastic together, it's made a little bit of a ridge, but that ridge will sand out, so it automatically fills in that gap, which is what I want. Okay, this obviously this repair here from the original brake, I had one on this side too. You can actually see that vertical line here. You can see that vertical line is, that wheel well was broken there too, but that can fill in a little bit of CA glue or something. And as you can see, filled in with a little bit of super glue. I think there's a little bit here, there's a section here of the other gas cap, a little bit of a corner piece there, but anyway, that's no worries there. Okay, so this is already, I mean, my fingers don't stick to the plastic. This is handleable, but not workable yet. It still can be moved around and manipulated. But one of the things I want to do is check, always use a ruler, and I didn't do this before, but use a ruler and make sure that your wheel wells, that you have the same rocker length on both sides. As you can see, it's about from the end of that curve there, or we can actually use the door gap even, this 7 centimeters, and if we take right to the edge there to the door gap is 7, so we're good. So that's a good fitment. And if we take the chassis, the model chassis it comes with here, we set that in there, we should be looking down the wheel well, and it should line up somewhere on the chassis the same, so that when you build this model with these wheel wells in it, the wheels will be centered. Just to give you an idea what that would look like if you were doing a race car. This is a slick from an AMT. You can see it's the wheel well is not big enough to accommodate that slick. So if you're going to radius it and have the slick stick out, don't even worry about this wheel well. If you're going to tuck it in behind, or even if you're just building a street rod and you want to put on some Corvette rally wheels, that's how it will look, minus the front hub here in the back. So it's kind of an interesting look if you want to do a 55 Chevy. Okay, so now it's dried overnight. I let this completely set in. As you can see, it dried pretty straight with no big ridge to worry about. And with the chassis out of it, you can see all that glue is dried. This is now nice and strong. You can actually flex the whole body. There's no cracking or anything like that. It's pretty durable with that glue, welding it in there. So now I can work this panel and smooth it out. I use a Dremel, which has, instead of it being like a sandpaper disc or that kind of bit, or abrasive stone, this is like a carbide style, and I've used this shape and it seems to do everything I need to do. I never have to change out this bit. It's really good. Takes away plastic nicely. It doesn't clog up, and it's been awesome for me. So with plastic, you don't want to be at a real high speed because you just start to melt the plastic, so you want to just take away product. So we're going to start by taking the stripe away, just a little bit at a time. The trick is you don't want to go too much. That's when things get out of hand and you got to start backfilling. So that's good for there. Let's just keep going. You can hear it's not very fast. It's just on a slow speed. Just want to take it away. I don't want to melt the plastic. That's enough there. Well, also what I'll do is I'll just go over the line that I created. high there. Okay, the rest I'll have to pick out with my hobby knife, but there you go, stripe's gone. Also on the inside, I have some thickness on the panel that's thicker, so I'm going to just knock that down so it's level. Flushed out my panels. If you wanted to glue some sort of strengthening in here, like a strip, if you level it out, you'll actually get a good bond. So I don't need to do that, but alright, now, so I've taken out on the inside here so it's not so rough, and the outside, taking off the trim. Just got to use a knife here and get this last little bit taken out. Bit of a scrape now. There we go. Now we can take our sandpaper and work it out. A good trick, if you don't want to sand off detail, just take a piece of masking tape and put it over top of something like a door handle or a emblem if you don't want to lose it. And this way, if you hit it with the sandpaper, it won't knock it off. If you do wear through the sandpaper, just take the time to replace it and you won't have an issue. As you can see, I can work out this panel. I'm going to go wet sand this, so what I'm going to do is run it under water. Let me go get go over there and do that. By wet sanding it, I keep the sandpaper clean and do the best job at knocking this down. Basically, we're wet sanded now, and you could fill this in with I like to use a little bit of super glue just to finish that off. I didn't do that on this side, just to show you. What I'm going to do now is just finish up this rocker panel, clean this up, and then put it in primer so you can see how it looks. If you throw primer on top and you've wet sanded and you get water somewhere in here, it'll paint. You don't want to do that. Mix paint and water, so you want to make sure this is thoroughly dry before you'd spray anything on here. And before I spray anything on here, I have a few things to do anyway. One of them is I want to kind of bring this down to match the body line on the bottom, and you can do that with sandpaper. I like to use a sanding pad or sanding. I built this wooden board that has sandpaper glued to it, or you can use one of those little like popsicle stick sanders. Except my 4-year-old is taking them all, so that's okay. There you go. Sand the wheel well a little bit. Now the only thing we got left here to do now is on this front part of the wheel well here, I have to glue in a little piece just to fill in this rocker. If you notice, the rocker is not exactly the same, even though it's on the real car it would be, on the model it's not. So we're just gonna glue in a piece. You could cut a piece of styrene in this case, so like a little piece of styrene, and you could glue that in there, shape it out. Or if you don't have styrene and you have like a piece of tree, you can cut off a little tab here, and that's probably what I'm going to do. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to cut off this tab. Okay, and then I'm going to take the number 39 that's on the tab, sand it off, a couple of rubs here. Okay. So now it's nice and flat. And then I'm going to cut this in half, and what that'll allow me to do is it'll give me a left and a right side little piece of plastic to work with. And this has a little curve on it, which is okay. Be able to get that in there. So what I'm going to have to do is trim this little bit off so that I can glue that down flat. So clean that off. Okay. Then I can glue that in. This may not have to be done on every model, but for the modification that I'm showing you here, this is a necessary step. But in other models you may have, it may line up perfectly good. You don't have to do things like this. But this is also a good way of showing you how I would do a repair on a body that might need something added. Now these little clamps, they're spring loaded, and they do a wonderful job on holding something. And the nice thing about these clamps, this plastic on this clamp does not stick to the model glue, or is not affected by the model glue, I should say. This plastic magic, if you're working with a CA glue, it would stick to the clamp, but in this case I can just get that on there. And pressure is a big thing when you're working with this glue. You want to pressure something on, get it wet, pressure it down, and that will really make a good bond. Okay. Well, now you got to set it down and let it dry. So a project like this, it's nice to just sort of do a little bit, walk away from it, work on something else. And the thing is, I'm not building this car as a model car of anything specifically. It might become a 2-lane blacktop car, if anything. But what I want to do is just do the body modification, and then when I feel like building this model, it will be ready to go. So when the body modification is done, it'll sit in the box with a kit, and when that time comes, this will happen. So don't expect much more to be done on this right now, but it may be built in full on the channel. I just wanted to show you how to do work like this, or how I do the work like this. You can always vary it to different materials and different techniques that you like to use. What I find with modeling is that whatever works for you is the best way for you to do it. If you're good at painting a certain way, it doesn't hurt to learn a new technique. Like for instance, if you're using rattle cans and you get a really good job and you want to learn how to airbrush, that's not a bad thing. But if it works for you and you enjoy the process, why change it? So I'm just showing you what works for me on this. Alright, also while that's hardening, I'm just going to do another thing that'll take some time. I got some super glue here. This is just regular liquid super glue. Sometimes you can use a gel or whatever if you want more thickness. What I'm going to do is just add a thin line of glue along the joint here. And let that harden. That line I can then sand out, and should be nice and smooth when it's done. Okay, I've changed the camera angle a little bit here. This is all dry now with the super glue, as you can see. On the side here I can touch that, as you can see a glossy spot. I've taken something, a piece of styrene for instance, and just taken the edge of it and flattened that glue out while it was still wet to kind of spread it out a bit and sand it out. Now we got to address this little issue here. So for that is sort of just, I don't know, you have to whittle it away using a knife, a file. Just get in there and reshape that rocker panel a little bit at a time. We don't want to overdo it, so first I'm just going to take a little bit of the plastic off. We also got to remember that when we get to the end here, this wheel well lip has to extend down too, so we don't want to take it right off all the way to the end, so we just need a little bit at a time. There's that body line now on the bottom brought out. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sand this off here, and I'm going to go and wet sand that. Okay, and you can see got it all wet sanded here out. I don't feel anything. Of course, you'll never know till you put paint on this to know if it's actually smooth. Okay, the body's still wet. I'm just drying it off from the wet sand. And we'll see how that looks there. It looks pretty smooth. I don't feel anything. You see that line because there's that primer behind the super glue. So no matter what you do, that's still going to be there. So anyway, we'll just dry this off. You have to be really thorough when you're drying this off now to put paint and primer on it. We've taken the wheel wells from the 1955 AMT Nomad, the rear wheel wells, and had grafted them into the AMT 1955 two-door sedan body. And what we're left with here is a 1955 two-door sedan with open wheel wells in the rear, Nomad wheel wells, like they would have used in the movie Two Lane Blacktop or American Graffiti. I think we're the same car, is what I understand. So, there you have it. That's what it looks like. This isn't perfect. It's not 100%. As you can see, I just primered over top of what I did. It's a little bit of a rough bodywork. You can see it in the primer because the way the super glue and the plastic absorbs the paint. It will, once this dries, you can do a quick little sand and then give it another shot. This is still a little bit tacky, so I'm not going to handle it. And you can see the other side as well. There you go. So you can see just that little line, and that'll body work out just like anything else. So now this car I'd treat like a raw model. I just got it basically, and you'd body work the entire body just like you would anything else that you wanted to do. So again, the level of body work would have to be better. If you put a gloss black on something like this, you would have to make sure it's absolutely perfect. If you did a flat primer black on something like this, you could get away with almost the way it is right now. So there you have it. That's what it looks like. I made this video just to show the proof of concept, basically, what it would look like if you did that modification. It may have been done somewhere else in the past, I don't know, somewhere else, but this was my version of it, if it has been. Just something I wanted to try and do. And as you can see, in the beginning I used kits that were somebody had already started or painted, or one that was a glue bomb. That's how I got the wheel well, so I didn't wreck a brand new kit for that. But I did want to just show you what a brand new body looks like, so you know what that would turn into if you wanted to do something like that. I do want to point out that the wheel wells on the Nomad, if you take, like, these are the wheel wells now out of the Bel Air, if you line them up, these ones are really good, like they're the same left to right. But on the Nomad, when I did that, when both wheel wells are cut out, they're not exactly the same, but when you get one on one side, one on the other side, you can't really tell. Alright, well, there you have it. 1955 Chevy with 1955 Nomad rear quarters grafted into the rear of this car. Just wanted to show the proof of concept and what it could look like if you wanted to try this modification yourself and how the end result would turn out. This is just set on a different chassis. I had a 57 chassis just to show you with slicks and tires what that could look like. And that's, like I said, I don't have plans to build this car just yet, but when that time comes, this is the direction I'd be taking this model. So anyway, I just wanted to do this little video to show how I go about modifying these panels and getting them in, and what it took to do so from my perspective. Share that information with you. So anyway, if you like these videos, please subscribe, hit that like button, ring that bell for notifications. Have yourself a great day. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.